Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we're talking about Supergirl. We're going to be talking about two things today, but to start, we're going to be talking about Supergirl. And Supergirl, the Woman of Tomorrow is one of the movies that James Gunn announced in the new DCU slate, it's part of Chapter One, Gods and Monsters. And basically, we are meant to get a movie that's hopefully going to spawn a whole franchise. Of course, the most recent Supergirl iteration and live action that we got was, depending on which one you watched, The Flash, where we got, I thought, a pretty good iteration, although maybe a little underused. And then, of course, if you were a fan of the TV show, Supergirl, then that show had been around for years and years. So I'm sure, you got. I hope you got your fill of Supergirl there. And now that the new DCU is on its way, it looks like we are starting to get into the casting process, which is natural. And as part of that process, they're looking to shortlist a few actors and see who's going to be the right fits for the role. We don't really know who the director is yet, but to discuss all of that and so much more, today I've got with me John, as always. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well,
So
definitely.
I wanted to ask you, like, what are your thoughts about the Supergirl story, which came out yesterday, and they said that they were shortlisting a few actors for the role. What are your thoughts?
Well, Supergirl is a character I've grown to appreciate over the years. I liked the TV show when it was on. I gave up after season 5 because I just couldn't handle the terrible writing anymore. But I do like the character. I like both Supergirl and Power Girl. Both are great characters for their own separate reasons. And I think the biggest problem that the show had is she was essentially a millennial with superpowers, and that's not really what the character is. At least the modern interpretation of the character. And I just felt like they went the wrong way, and they kind of just created a female Superman, which is not what Supergirl is. And so I feel like they missed a lot of beats in that respect of the show. And with the Flash, not a great movie, but I will say Sasha Calle was a very good Supergirl for what little screen time she did have. She did kind of embrace more of that like darker edge that she would have, especially with someone who was locked up. So you have like that extra sort of bit to the character. And with the short list, I think all three of these actresses could do a very good job. Even one of them already, Meg Donnelly, I believe it was. She voices the character in the Tomorrowverse in the Legion of Superheroes, and then I think she also did it in Crisis on Infinite Earths, which came out last year. And I haven't watched those two specific ones just yet. I have watched some Tomorrowverse, but not anything specific in terms of Legion and that yet. But yeah, I'm sure all three actresses would do a fantastic job. I haven't seen House of the Dragon either, so I don't know about Amelia Alcock either. But Amelia Jones, I did watch Lock and Key, and I did watch a little bit of Coda. I started watching it, but then I got busy with other stuff and I didn't finish it. Not saying it was bad, definitely very, very good from what little I saw of it. Amelia Jones is definitely the name I'm most familiar with, and I do think she could definitely do a really good job because from her performance in Lock and Key, she definitely kind of, and even parts of Coda, she definitely has that like edge about her where she's not just like, like typical teenage girl type of thing, where she could definitely have that like harder edge. And especially with Coda, if nobody knows the context, she is the only hearing individual in her deaf family. So she's kind of the outcast there in that case, having this ability that nobody else has. Huh? Sound familiar? So
Mhm.
she has like, and she kind of feels like, even though she like loves her family, she still feels like an outcast. So I definitely think those two roles, the ones I'm most familiar with, she definitely embodies like the character kind of already with those two roles. And I think she would definitely do a superb job. I'm sure all three would definitely do great, but Jones is the one I'm most familiar with, so I definitely think she could pull it off, and I definitely like the look they're going for with the character as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, the three actresses couldn't look more different from one another, as far as, you could tell just by looking at the pictures that they chose for this Hollywood report sorry, this Deadline article, where you look at the 3 of them and they each present 3 fairly different
Mhm.
visions for the character. Not to say that, I mean, I'm not saying that tells you that, oh, these guys don't know what they're doing. I'm sure James Gunn and co know what they're looking for. And then if you look a little bit further down in this article, it does mention like that there was a chance they could just. Oh, I'm scrolling way past into the comments. The comments on Deadline are some of the funnier things to watch. But anyway, um, if you read the article itself, it does mention that they could make a straight offer to a star. Like they could just offer one of these 3, or maybe one somebody else who is not even mentioned in this article,
Right.
the role right away. But it's more likely that they're going to actually, run them through screen tests, which is normal to see. I mean, they did that for Superman and Lois Lane, and they tested them separately and together as to see what the chemistry was, and we
Yeah.
heard about like what pairings they were doing, and that's how they picked out our Superman and Lois Lane. So I could totally see how they would try to do something similar here. Um, as far as the movie itself goes, I am curious to see who they choose to direct the movie, because I believe we know the screenwriter that they brought on because she wrote a really good script. I think actually covered it on DC Daily, right? So
Mhm.
um, the director, I think, is going to matter a lot in this case,
Yeah.
because you're looking at a situation where it's a new vision on the character, a character who's already had, I think, the Supergirl, the TV show. While you wouldn't necessarily call it a definitive take on the character, it's
Mm.
definitely an iconic take because it ran for so long and so many people followed that version of the character across television, the crossovers, and her own show, which ran on 2 different networks, CBS and the CW. So you have that, and then of course you had the version in Supergirl, which it seems like we got way more news and coverage about that version of the character before the movie came out than we did once the movie came out. So, having said that, however, I think there was always going to be highly unlikely that they were going to move forward with Sasha Kaya in the new DCU, because they probably want to differentiate and say that, hey, we don't want to give you any inkling of an idea that this might be a version that connects us to the previous continuity. And that's probably the reason why a lot of the Justice League characters are being recast as well. So the same would apply to Supergirl, even though she only made like a slightly more than a cameo's worth of appearance in one of the DCEU movies, that being Sasha Kaye. So what about like your pick? I mean, I don't know, I forgot if you actually mentioned who you would want between the 3 of these, who you think would be the best pick if you had to just if you were James Gunn today and these were the 3
Um,
actresses,
I
whose
mean,
resume
all
was on
3
your
of them
desk.
could be great. I mean, the thing is I'm most familiar with Amelia Jones, so I would pick her kinda just naturally because I haven't really seen a lot of I don't think I've seen anything from the other 2 actresses, but Meg Donnelly has a one up because she plays the character. She voices the character, which is a different performance, but that's
Yeah.
definitely gives her some sort of street cred with the character. But in terms of, so I d that could be really, really good or really, really bad depending on how you look at it. It could be it could be like, "Oh, it's really good because she knows what the character is, she knows what to do and all that, even if this is a different interpretation." Or that could be totally bad because they're like, "Okay, we don't want anybody who has done anything with the character before, and we totally want." But I mean, she is on the short list for a reason, so that could be something, I don't know. But Jones would probably be my favorite. I've seen the most from her. And she definitely has the acting talent and the inspiration there for the character. So I definitely think she would probably be my favorite out of all of them, but I'm sure all 3 of them could do an excellent job.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're right about that as far as the talent goes. All 3 of them, like I said, they could potentially provide 3 very different looks for the character just by I mean, not to, here's the thing though, like, Millie Alcock looks very different when she's in House of the Dragon than when she's on the red carpet for House of the Dragon.
Mhm.
Emilia Jones looked very different, like the way her costumes and her hair was kept for Coda was very different than how she usually is in most of her press appearances. So you can always say that, while they may look very different, they could all fit a similar vision. Having said that, I mean, James Gunn is part of the process of casting this character, and it looks like they're speculating here in Deadline that whoever they cast, this may be a character that gets introduced to a cameo in a project that is not Supergirl. So we could very well see her in, like, Superman Legacy at some point, whether it's within the main story of the movie or maybe a post-credit scene that sort of hints at, two movies down the road we'll pay off this post-credit scene, something that Marvel, I think, used to do very well. I think of late they've sort of dropped the ball on a few of those things, although we'll see. I think the post-credit scene in the Marvels was pretty good, and that, I mean, as long as they pay it off. As if it was a one-off, then that would be a problem. But I think that was the thing about, like, back in the early days of the MCU, like when you saw Nick Fury walk in at the end of the first Iron Man movie, or like when Tony Stark walks into the bar at the end of the Incredible Hulk. Like those connections were then later on, they paid them off. Whether it was in Iron Man 2 or whether it was, in Captain America: Civil War, where you get all those same characters in the same room again, and it helps to establish this, web of interactions and relationships that helps to flesh out the universe in a way that makes it feel lived in and real, so that you can kind of follow along and it feels larger, a little more larger than life. Like it doesn't just feel like a TV show or a movie. It just feels like, oh, there's, while we're living our lives in this world, those characters are living their lives in this fictional world. And, every once in a while we get a window into their lives through the movies or through the TV show that they decide to, put on air. So I hope that, Supergirl gets to come in and maybe, have a part in some other project, and then that's our introduction to the character. You naturally then start to hype up, like, oh, this is the Supergirl we're gonna get, and then we move forward with our own project. And I think that would be also a good way to start the marketing drive really early. Like, it's like the Batman, for example. That movie had such a organic marketing push behind it from the moment that Matt Reeves came in to the moment Robert Pattinson gets cast, well before the first costume video came out and everything. And
Mhm.
this, they've done it with Batman all the time. Like Ben Affleck's, it was a big deal when Ben Affleck's the brooding Batman. Those become that meme, that sad Batman looking down with like they posted that with the Batmobile, like that whole thing. I think they could do something similar here with Supergirl, and I'm looking forward to it. What about you?
Yeah.
Actually, before, I wanted to ask you, like, when are we gonna get this movie? Because they haven't dated it. They don't have a director for it. It's
Right.
2024, and they were gonna do 2 movies a year, 2 shows a year. At least that was the goal that James Gunn said. But even though that was the goal, I mean, are they really gonna be able to achieve that cadence at all? Because right now we've got 1 show this year, 1 movie next year, and even the show this year, Creature Commandos, doesn't have a release date. The only project in all of the DCU that has an actual release date, outside of maybe, I don't know if Brave and the Bold has a release date. If you just know it's coming out in a year, in a particular year, but it doesn't have like a date. Superman Legacy is the only project that has a date,
Yeah.
which I believe is like July or June something 2025. So
Yeah.
where do you think Supergirl lands on this release schedule?
If I mean, the thing is, if the slate that Gunn revealed is in order, like it goes Legacy, Authority, Brave and the Bold, Supergirl, Swamp Thing, then it's going to be the second to last. Which, if they're doing 2 movies a year outside of Legacy, because it seems like I think Legacy is like kind of testing the waters to see, okay, are people going to like this vision? We'll see. And then if it does very well, then we're like, okay, let's go all in and do 2 movies a year. So then I think if I were to guess, the Authority would come out in 2020. The Authority and Batman Brave and the Bold would come out in 2026, and then Supergirl and Swamp Thing would come out in 2027. But if it's not as successful, they're like, okay, well, we stuck with our thing, and sometimes you just got to stay the course. They're like, okay,
Right.
let's just do a movie a year and just like try to just slowly move out, and then Supergirl would then come out in 2028, which is not too bad, but it would definitely probably come out later down the line if it were to case, which is probably good because I don't think, well, it's obvious that they're picking an actress who's on the younger side, late teens, early 20s, while David Corenswet is bordering on, I think he's turning 30 this year. So
Yeah.
that's like kind of like a good dynamic to have. But I would like for them to wait a little bit longer because I would like to see a slightly older, more seasoned Superman to be with Supergirl, who's like knows of this world a lot more and has done the heroism a lot more, and then have him kind of like mentor a younger Kara if they're gonna have her on Earth and it's not directly gonna adapt the Tom King storyline. But I would like to see a slightly older Superman because I think that would work a little bit better than, just immediately just having that cameo and legacy. I think they definitely need to wait. I think they're just getting the character now, and then she'll, appear later on because she's such a big integral character that I'm like, I might as well cast her now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a dynamic that we have really haven't seen in live action much. I think the
Mhm.
CW version, they kinda botched that whole thing because they
Yeah.
made the Superman, like, such a jobber Superman, but as far as, like, the animated shows, the Justice League shows, like, that's where I think they played their hand quite well. In fact, Supergirl had some really good character arcs, if I remember correctly, in the Justice League, animated shows. So, I think it was JLU, Justice League Unlimited. So,
Yes,
I
yes.
hope that we get to that at some point. But, guys, let us know in the comments what you think about this. Are you looking forward to seeing one of these actresses be cast in the role of Supergirl, whether it's Millie Alcock, whether it's Amelia Jones, whether it's Meg Donnelly, or somebody else? Maybe Sasha Calle is still in the running. We know that those three names, that I just mentioned, are the primary names, but they're amongst the ones that are on the short list. Or so there may yet be more that we don't know about. So let us know in the comments what you think about that, and of course, like and subscribe for more DCU daily content like this. We are back here each and every day. So now let's switch our focus on to Waller, which was the topic that we had originally scheduled to talk about today, until of course we had that news drop. So Waller is a show that it's meant to continue, I guess continue, but maybe start anew the story of Amanda Waller, and because this is the new continuity with the DCU, it's a little confusing because you've got Viola Davis playing the same character that she played in the DCEU for 2 Suicide Squad movies and a Peacemaker show, and I think she also, yeah, she made, like, a cameo appearance in Black Adam, so she was already being heavily integrated into the larger DC, EU story, and of course, there's a lot of, background of, like, who she is as a person and her relationships and, like, what the network she's built around herself that she's leveraged to no end, it seems like. Um, but the question becomes, now that this new Waller show is going to take place in the DCU and is disconnected from any of that other continuity that we have seen before, but the actor is the same, there's all kind like, is she gonna play this something that's a character that's basically the same, except that, we're just gonna forget about what happened before? Or is she gonna look different? Are we meant to believe that everything that happened in those Suicide Squad movies and Peacemaker is still sort of canon? Like, there's a lot of questions that fans have, and rightfully so, and John, I believe you probably have the same kinds of questions, so I'll pose it to
Yep.
you. What do you think this Waller show actually is going to be? Like, what was the vision? Because they didn't really give away much in that
Yeah,
presentation
they
that
didn't.
James Gunn and Peter Safran made. So, like, what is this show going to be? Because if you take out all of those previous projects that set up Amanda Waller, because she wasn't the lead in any of them, but she
Yeah,
was a significant part of the story, and so we've had a lot of background to her character and who she is and how she relates to the larger world at hand of the DC, story, whether it's the DCEU or the DCU. But this is like the epitome of that, confusing gray area where James Gunn has chosen to take a few elements of the DCEU and move them forward, whereas he has left the rest behind. So, what are your thoughts on this show and what it can be and what it maybe should be?
yeah. Because Waller is just like kind of like a weird. I don't want to say anomaly, but like kind of almost. Because if you look at all the other shows that are coming out in terms of Chapter One, the stuff that's confirmed, I'm not talking about the million other shows that are coming out just this year and next year and all that. I'm talking about like Creature Commandos. That's like obviously more like supernatural, weirder, surreal, kind of following a little bit in Doom Patrol in a way. And that's they're a supernatural team going after supernatural threats. And they have like Dr. Phosphorus and Frankenstein and and Weasel and all that. So you have that team, and they're doing their own thing, and she's gonna, I believe, appear on in there too. Then you have Lanterns, which is par for the course. We've gotten so much Green Lantern stuff, like they're known characters. And you have so many Green Lanterns to choose from. Obviously, they're picking the first two because they're the most popular, and it's like a cosmic thing. They said like a police proceed like proceed. I know that one of the things that was kind of shopping around on one of the Green Lantern projects, like the 10 that were like announced but never came to be, was like someone described as like Lethal Weapon in space. I'm like, okay, that's like awesome. We could definitely see where that where that mindset is. Or Paradise Lost, as we talked about yesterday, like obviously that's like the history of Themyscira, like what like the origins of that and how like dealing with the inner politics of like Hippolyta and all these other characters that are relatively known, and how the society of women like grew into the Themyscira we know of, and how um those like beats and paths led to what we saw, or at least close to what we saw in Wonder Woman, since this is a different continuity, all that. Then Booster Gold, again, that's a guy that's received tons of comics and appearances and all this other stuff. And so we know what to expect with all these other characters. Amanda Waller is kind of like a weird one. She's got cameos, supporting character, and all that. We know of the character. We know who she is. She's the Wall. She's the leader of Argus and Task Force X. But it's like, what can you exactly do with that? So what the question is like, what you shouldn't do, well, at least with the title of this episode, is it shouldn't obviously just be a Suicide Squad show, because that's just not what was promised. Like, if you want to do a Suicide Squad show, fine, just call it Suicide Squad. In fact, that would be awesome. Like, I would love to see like more into that the Black Ops idea of like what David Ayer tried to do and failed at. And like kind of go into the like multiple missions per season, and then they can like we develop the characters further and all that. So like awesome, great. But with Waller, it's like this smaller character we don't know a ton about, and it's like, what are they gonna do? So the most I could think of in terms of Amanda Waller as a character is they're probably good. Now they could do a prequel series, like kind of build up the character. Maybe not a prequel series, but like maybe the first season is a prequel, because you have to like redo everything, because it's like, okay, what version of the character are we going with? Are we going with with Suicide Squad version where like Stone Cold would kill people just to keep everything a secret, all that stuff, in the Suicide Squad, and to a lesser extent Peacemaker, where she is a little bit of a ridiculous and sillier character, maybe deadpan but still kind of sillier, because it's under Gunn's direction and he usually does sillier stuff. Or are they going to go with like Black Adam, where she's just like this big leader in charge of a lot of stuff, and is like that's kind of it. So it's like you could kind of go from there. So like I think it would be kind of interesting to like start out like, okay, let's build up this version of the character a bit and then go from there. Now they could do like a CIA Black Ops show, like maybe like a Jack Ryan type of
That'd
thing.
be nice. Yeah.
Like, but the thing is, she's not really the type of person to go into the field, though. So I don't know how they would make that work. Again, it would be more along the lines of like an Argus show rather than a Waller show. Than like following like all the characters shown on screen right now is like the soldiers. That's like, for instance, that would be like if the Jack Reacher show was like about Jack Reacher, but he like consistently sent the supporting cast to do his dirty work and just did nothing. So it's like, okay, well, how can you make that work? Because she's not really a field agent. So I don't really I would like to see that, but I don't know how you would make that work with a character that doesn't really like do a lot, instead of like sitting in a room and yelling at people. So that is probably what they're going to do. It's like kind of be like a kind of Jack Ryan Black Ops thing, but like from Waller's perspective. Maybe it's like the inner workings of Argus, where it's kind of like Agent Carter in a way, where it's like it's about kind of that oh, I'm blanking on the agency not Hydra.
Oh,
Uh,
Shield.
Shield, yes.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of like all about Argus, but through the lens of the main character. In this case, it would be
Yeah.
Waller rather than Agent Carter. Um, so like you could do that as well. But I don't really know. It's just kind of like a weird thing to have Amanda Waller as like the main character when she doesn't really do a ton from what I'm aware of, you know? Like she's good as a supporting character. Like she's good at like being like sort of like a mysterious antagonist sort of thing. So I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
just curious what other people's theories are because I'm a little bit lost on this one because maybe because I'm just not as familiar with the character as I am with all the other characters and ideas and settings. But it's just this one's like kind of like a weird show to make because I feel like there's
that's
other
true.
more interesting shows that she could be attached to that would be more interesting, like Suicide Squad and Argus and all that. So I don't know. It's just like kind of weird to think about. Kind of weird thing, weird choice.
That's definitely true because I think this show would have made a lot of sense if they were gonna continue with the DCEU continuity because doesn't she, like, get arrested at the end of or so like, something happens to her character at the end of Peacemaker season 1.
I don't
So
know, I never watched Peacemaker. I
yeah,
don't
I mean, I
know.
think because, like, when you look at the poster for well, the artwork that they use, not really the poster, but the artwork that they use to pitch this show in that whole James Gunn presentation, she's, like, in handcuffs looking up at the camera, let's say. Um,
Mm,
it gives me a sense that they are probably not picking up from, like, the beginning, although, maybe that happens in, like, flashbacks, like, maybe
yeah,
that's it's kind of a back and forth, like, this is how we got here, because the biggest thing for me would be both for this show as well as for Peacemaker season 2 or whatever they're gonna Peacemaker, the Peacemaker or whatever, the DCU Peacemaker, whatever they want, however they're gonna differentiate it from the first season,
mm,
because unless they're gonna retroactively like fit the first season into the continuity of the DCU, with both characters, both Peacemaker and Amanda Waller, as well as the larger show continuities, they need to establish very clearly that these are different iterations than what we have has come before.
yeah,
Like they need to like they can't be sitting on the wall the whole time because that's only going to invite criticism, confusion, and ultimately probably failure. So I think they need to do what everything in their power to make this version of Waller not be the version that we saw before, even though it's the same actor playing the character. So they should probably do something that like directly contradicts the events of the first two Suicide Squad movies, maybe even the events of the first season of Peacemaker. And similarly, Peacemaker will probably want to do something like that so that we can immediately strike that other stuff off the plate. If they don't choose to do that, if they still choose to kind of be like, we're sort of doing this and maybe keeping that. I mean, it's look, here's the thing, you look at it's a great example, very timely right now. You look at the example of what they have done with the Echo. Just came out, and in the final trailers before the show came out, they finally put out the clips involving Daredevil wearing his red suit from the Netflix show, and you get a much more Netflixy version of Kingpin, and the show is TVMA. And then if people who have watched the show are saying, "Yeah, I mean, look, it's not a Daredevil show," which I'm glad it's not because the name of the show is Echo, but he definitely shows up, and then you definitely get just kind of see some of the continuity come across from those Netflix shows, and it's they basically made the admission, yeah, you know what, that Netflix stuff is canon, or as canon as it can be.
yeah,
They might still like you know what's the word that they may still retcon a few things
yeah,
because they've done that with other things in the past. I think some of the events of the Incredible Hulk don't quite line up with later events. There's other things that instances like that where they have done that in the MCU already. In the Star Trek universe, the newer series retcon older series stuff all the time these days. Um, whether it's the size of the ship or certain events when they took place in the timeline, moving those around for the convenience of what's on air now. So playing it a little loose, it wouldn't be unprecedented. Of course, you know, with the Fox X-Men universe, there was a saying, a very famous saying, continuity is spontaneity, because nobody really care. After the original trilogy, they were like, "F that, we're somehow still gonna keep with the same thing." But then, I mean, they were rewriting that original trilogy as they were making the new set of movies up until they got bought by Disney. So, and not to mention Logan sort of just took place in its own bubble.
Mhm.
So they could very well take that kind of a path, but I think that will ultimately lead to, like I said, confusion and, probably just eventually, bad failure and controversy. Like, that's just not what you should be doing. So if I had to make a bet, I would say they have to make this show something that is very different from what we have seen from Waller before, but also is still at the same time quintessentially Waller. Like, it
Yeah,
needs to be Amanda Waller's show. Like, what you
right.
said, like, it could be about Argus. It could be about Argus. Like, Argus could definitely be a part of the picture, but I would definitely love to see, the focus be on her. And
Yeah,
if you are to go by the artwork that they pitched, and if she is incarcerated, then let's get that. Let's figure out why she how she ended up there, what she did,
yeah.
and I wanna know how that is different from, the events of the previous DCEU continuity. So I think this show would give them a chance to do that. People have speculated that, like what they were doing under Walter Hamada with the DCEU, making Waller sort of connective tissue, the Nick Fury of the DCEU.
Mhm.
They may try to do something similar here. Those are speculation. James Gunn has never said that that's what they're trying to do,
Right.
but like, and I was always sort of on the, on the edge about that because I really wasn't sure if I wanted Waller to be that kind of character that connects all the dots, because she's
Right.
such an antagonistic force, like, usually, but then again, there's nothing wrong with that connective tissue being an antagonistic force, whereas, like, Nick Fury generally is more of a protagonist in most instances.
Yeah.
How do you feel about potentially, like, Waller being introduced here, and then eventually she ends up becoming somebody who doesn't necessarily have her own movie or TV show, outside of the one that we're getting, but ends up being a part of all the, these other cameos that she makes, whether, she shows up at the end of the movie and, like, hey, Superman's gonna come and meet you because we're gonna initiate you into the world of superheroes on Earth now that you're here, or something like
Right.
that. um how do you feel about that, like, in terms of her place in this new universe?
I think, yeah, shouldn't be like a Nick Fury type in terms of character, just a Nick Fury type in terms of like, hey, this all takes place in the same universe. You're part of a bigger picture, blah, 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 all that stuff, and then gets out. Like that kind of thing, like I don't mind. Like I like that just her being like, it's not just you, Superman, it's a lot of things and all that. So you could do that. And I think that could be fine. I think it would honestly because they never said that they just said in terms of these 5, shows that it's just gonna be, they're just gonna be on TV, so it's entirely possible that Waller isn't gonna be a TV show, maybe just a mini series, like, oh, it's just her time in prison and then she gets out, or it's just this, like, bridge of, like, okay, DCEU to DCU, just kinda just reconstructing what this character is, and then that's it, it's gone. It's like, I think maybe it's just a miniseries could also just work with that. Maybe a second season if like the show does really well. But I can't imagine like Waller going on for like so long. Like Creature Commandos, they could like milk like 5 or 6 seasons out of that. Same with Lanterns and Booster Gold. I could definitely see those series going on for really a long time. Waller, I don't see going on for like more than like 2 seasons. Same with Paradise Lost. I don't see that going on for like maybe like more than like 3 seasons. Waller, I think, would work as a mini series. I don't know what they have planned because they never said like it was going to be a TV series. It was just going to be a TV project. So it could just be like a mini series, which would be better, I think. Maybe two, but maybe not too long. I just can't see Amanda Waller just like handling her own show for that long. Not saying Viola Davis can't. Viola Davis can do anything she fucking wants.
Yeah.
She can rule the room. She could do anything. Like it's Viola Davis. She is a tremendous talent. I'm just saying Amanda Waller as a character, I don't think can sustain something that where she is the protagonist. I think she's just better as sort of like the mysterious antagonistic force behind various events and teams and settings and all that rather than, her own character in her own show. Because and then on top of that, like with a TV show, like there's like kind of like the development of the character. Like I don't want to see her develop because she should be an asshole and stay an asshole type of thing. Like she's not a character that should develop. So, I think
Yeah.
she needs to. I don't know. I feel like again, James Gunn, he's written the character, twice now. So he's written her in Peacemaker and written her in um the Suicide Squad. So like he kind of knows like I guess what to do with character. He's a big fan, obviously. So he knows like those various things. But I feel like I think he should like kind of should be some restraint in terms of this character, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's definitely the prospect of, like, you're sort of just, like, give her a character arc that once it ends, then you really she can't really be that antagonistic force anymore. Although here's the thing, there is such a concept in film and storytelling in general where you have unchanging character arc. Like,
That is
a
true.
character kind of stays the same, throughout the movie. Maybe they do learn a lot, but they're fatally flawed in some way. So it's more of a tragedy. So like maybe that's how we can treat this. There's also the potential for adding like layers to her character's background, her the more nuances to who she is as a person. Like, of course, they gave her a daughter, and there's all kinds of like other elements that they
Right.
added to her character beyond just being this almost evil, like about as evil as close to evil as you can, person working in like intelligence services who is basically taking advantage of these incarcerated individuals, to the point of just blowing their heads off. So I would appreciate doing something that kind of fits that spy thriller sort of vibe, but at the same time giving her as a character not a hero's arc, but more of like a tragic sort of an arc that she is, no matter what, she's sort of forever going to be the person that she is, and that's the antagonistic force. The character that, quite frankly, I think was one of the most reviled and best written characters in all of the DCEU, because whenever she showed up on screen, people like my reaction was the same as Will Smith's reaction at the end of the Suicide Squad. Like, how the hell aren't you dead yet? She's
Yeah.
got the remote in her hand. Like, why don't you test me? And Boomerang tries, like tries for a second. Uh, so I really did enjoy that part, although I don't know how much I liked her as the connective tissue. I think that's probably maybe pushing it a little too far, for my taste, but, then again, like, it just depends on how you write it. Like, I might be saying that today, and then 5 years down the road, she is a connected tissue in this whole universe, and I'd be like, it's about as good as it's gonna get. It's even better than what they did with Nick Fury, for all we know. Like, what
Hmm.
who knows where things are gonna go? But overall, I think at this point we can only do so much to speculate about what the show is going to be, because we don't really have much to go off of, and we don't even know like who the showrunner is. We don't know who the set of writers are going to be, how involved is James Gunn going to be, who the supporting cast will be, how many of those characters that we have seen before surrounding Amanda Waller are they going to return, or are we going to go with a completely different supporting cast, and like you said, what stage of our life is this going to be taking place? Is this a prequel, or is this meant to be taking place in the present day? So, guys, let us know in the comments what you think about this. This is definitely a topic that a lot of us, have speculated about for, I'm sure, since the time that this project was announced. But at the end of the day, we haven't really heard much about it since it was announced. So let us know in the comments what you think about Waller as a show. Do you agree that it can't just be a diet Suicide Squad? That it needs to be more than just a show that gives you more of what those movies were, where Amanda Waller is assembling Task Force X, and she's working through Argus. Do we should we go in a new direction? Should we maybe try to adapt new genres into this picture? And of course, like, what do you think about the character of Amanda Waller? Like, should she get a character arc, whether it's a positive or a negative arc? Let us know in the comments. And of course, if you'd like us to talk more about Waller or any other DC topic, leave that in the comments below, and like and subscribe for more content like this. We'll be back here tomorrow talking about more DC topics. I'm currently blanking on what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, but I'm sure that will go up on the channel soon, so you can take a look at what's on schedule. We'll be back here at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, and then of course we'll be back here after that on Monday. And this weekend, make sure to check in on the channel, and the Also Curious show will be back live. We'll be reviewing, I think, as many as 3 movies. So there's going to be a lot going on this weekend on the channel, and then Roller Underground is going to be back in I think a couple of months time. They're prepping a new season, so there's a lot happening at Also Curious. So of course, keep coming back here, and DCU Daily will be with you, daily. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching. John, thanks for joining the show today, and until next time, we'll see you on DCU Daily.